You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. I hope you are all doing very well out there and surviving whatever catastrophe the latest one is. COVID and riding and all the rest of it. I hope you're keeping safe and sound because I have something very special to share with you on this podcast, this edition of the podcast. This conversation features Steve Giorgio, bass player extraordinaire, the bass iconoclast, probably the greatest ever bassist in extreme and heavy metal. I know there's a few other great ones out there like Roger Patterson, God rest his soul, and Alex Webster, but Steve is just something else, isn't he? The reason for the conversation was actually inspired by the fact that he's doing a lot of videos these days. He's got one out there at the moment. He's doing a playthrough of Overactive Imagination. Highly recommend you check that out because you get to observe Steve's inimitable technique up close. As I say, the man really is something else. You know, he's just James Jamison, Jaco Pastorius, Stanley Clarke, Larry Graham. He's even a bit of Mark King. He's just got it all, and he does it all within the paradigm of extreme metal. A bit like the conversation with Stuart Anstis from Cradle of Filth. I've just left it all in there because I think it's important that the conversation is captured as it actually happened. And I'll probably get a bit of feedback at least every week from people all over the world telling me how much they appreciate that conversation with Stuart. And I think this is going to do something similar. So please do enjoy it. Before I let you go, I did capture the video this time around. I usually don't because I just focus on the podcast. But I thought, well, Steve asked me beforehand if we were going to do the chat via video or just audio. And I said, let's do video as well. And I'm really glad that I did because something that I can offer you because Steve's okayed it is, and it's up to you people who are listening actually to get in touch with me and tell me if enough people do. And when I say enough people, I'm just looking for half a dozen or so of you diehards out there, and you know who you are, because we have plenty of conversations over social media. You diehards out there, if you want to see the video, I will gladly post it. I'll put it up on YouTube, but you guys and girls have got to get in touch with me and let me know you want that to happen. But without any further delay, here he is. Man, this is really special. Steve Giorgio. Let's go. Hey mate, how you going? Looks like you're outside, mate. Looks nice.
Yeah, I had to come out here so I could talk. Everybody's working remote, and
yeah,
I'm not a very quiet person either, so I thought I'd give them the benefit.
Do you mind if I ask whereabouts you're living these days, mate? Are you still in California, or are you well outside of there?
Yeah, I mean, what they call Northern California, but it's pretty much this kind of middle. It's just to make it quick, about an hour east of San Francisco.
Oh yeah, gotcha. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, how's the civil situation where you are, mate? Because of course I've only got Twitter to go by, and I pretty much speak to. I was just talking to Craig and Lum yesterday, and Jean-Francois Dagenet from Cataclysm as well, and I just sort of always open by saying, "How are you guys going over there?" Because as I say, all we're seeing is all this bullshit and looting and rioting and stuff.
That seems to have pretty much calmed down. I live in pretty much suburbia, just homes. Fortunately, we're right on the edge of kind of the wild open area. So I get the benefit of just living in a comfortable neighborhood, but just literally like 2 minutes behind my house is just endless wilderness, hills, trails, trees, all that kind of stuff. But the reason I point all that out is all that stuff that you said, the looting and all the protesting, that goes on in kind of the bigger cities. So you'd have to get in the car and drive at least 45 minutes to encounter any of that. When it was at its peak, there was some disturbances like bricks going through store front windows and stuff downtown in our kind of like small town here.
Yeah.
There was a couple days that it was scary, but that was like the biggest peak that I have ever seen of it. And then once, and they imposed a curfew and they were grabbing people that were out at certain time of night. Once I got a handle on that, I mean, it's back to just kind of quiet suburbia. You get the random gunshots in the distance, but I mean, no,
Jesus.
nothing like nothing really organized out here.
It's pretty
And especially
confronting. Yeah.
lately, man, it's like it's burning up like an oven. I mean, I'm sitting here. I guess we're the only country that uses Fahrenheit, so we'll call it 41 degrees right now.
Jesus. Yeah.
So it's burning up. And then to top it off, the other morning we had this massive lightning storm with basically no rain. It was just this huge storm thing going over us, just throwing lightning bolts into the dry grass. So now,
Oh my God.
2 days later, we're just living in a smoke. Just all the fires that it started. So I know you could relate. Australia went through that. I guess as recently as last year, just extreme heat and just fires everywhere you turn. So
Yeah.
we're like a little piece of Australia over here across the Pacific.
I was going to say, the background behind you there, mate. If you told me you're up the road from me, I would believe you. It actually looks like my backyard behind you there.
Yeah.
So, with all the bushes and you can see the haze from the heat. To your point,
Yeah.
and we're used to that, as you know, mate. In the bloody bushfire situation, it's we're going from the frying pan into the fire. Literally, because I'm a journalist, I write for News Limited as well. And I was saying to somebody the other day, okay, then I know the world, we've all gone through it too, but in Australia, in the news desk, we were dealing with, first of all, it was the volcano in New Zealand. I don't know whether you heard about that, where people were eviscerated there. Then we went into the bushfire straight away, and then there was the COVID thing, all in the space of 3 months. It was just one thing after another. So more events happened in 3 months than effectively we were dealing with in the last decade.
I'm telling you. Yeah. On top of that, man, it's like, it's pretty easy to say the COVID thing, man, but I was hit with it.
That's right. You were too. Yeah, I spoke to Chuck about this. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I had a chat to Chuck and Eric from Testament, of course. Sorry, he's saying how shit he felt. And did you feel the same way?
I think I got hit a little harder because we were texting every day, updating and comparing symptoms and stuff. And eventually he's like, "Oh, we finally went for a drive in the car," and I'm still, laying in bed with a fever. Don't even have energy to walk down the hall to get a drink of water. So it took.
Yeah.
It hit me a lot harder than him. It seemed like it took forever. And then once the body, I think I went about 18 days straight with a fever. And just that alone just sucks. I mean, just waking up every morning hoping that the fever broke. Nope. Just day after day of a fever, man. It takes a lot out of you. And then once my body temperature got back to normal, it felt like the energy level, the extreme exhaustion and weakness, I want to say almost like a month just to fight through this slow, gradual climb out of the hole. So it was an easy 2 months steady of sickness. And then probably still after that, even a price to pay physically for going through that. So it was fucking brutal, man. I don't wish it on anybody, man. It's a really weird sickness. It's because in a way you feel like you've been sicker than that before. Like the symptoms aren't so strong. You're not blowing your nose every 5 minutes. And I did have a cough, officially had a real cough, but I've had way worse coughs, bronchitis and shit like that. Brutal. And during this COVID, it was like dialed back a little bit. Still a cough, but towards the end, the cough kind of rose up and got worse. And then all of a sudden everything got better. But yeah, it was really strange. It's really strange sickness, but it crushes you physically. And I could really see how people die from it, because someone just takes the dimmer of your life and just turns it down to just the low numbers. Right before it clicks to zero, I was really low, and you just feel like you're not you. You're just this mound of nothing. It was just out of gas. And but climbed out of it and survived. So just
good on you. Yeah, well,
drink a lot of tea and eat your greens.
and look, for the conspiracy theorists out there that don't believe it's a real disease, I mean, look, a lot of people listen to my podcast, and I've got no idea how many people are into conspiracy theories. I'm certainly not. I like to rely on scientific evidence and data, and I like diving into ancient aliens and all that stuff too. But I have a limit to these things, and my limit sort of stops when people start saying that this bloody coronavirus is a conspiracy theory. The only thing, do you listen to Joe Rogan at all, the podcast?
An occasional random one. Like I'll pick something super interesting, but I don't follow every episode.
Well, he has Eric Weinstein on there, who was the Evergreen Terrace lecturer, I think, who was kicked out for very unfair reasons and all the rest of it. But one of the smartest guys, if not the United States, the world, the United States for sure. But he was talking, he's a molecular biologist, I think. I'll get something wrong there. He's definitely a biologist of some kind, or medical biologist of some kind. But he was saying that this virus has all of the hallmarks of it being created in a laboratory. The wet market thing is a front because they don't really want it to get out that they have very lax biosecurity in China, which we kind of figured anyway because people are impoverished and they'd sell whatever they need to make sure that their family could survive and have a roof over their head and eat and all the rest of it. So, and that's what's making it so complicated. And so, in terms of the vaccination side of things. Actually arriving at a vaccine because it's a mutant effectively, this thing, and it's not going to be we're not going to come to a vaccine anytime soon, apparently.
Yeah, we're clearly living in a very, very unique time in not only obviously our life, but even the memories of even back to our grandparents. I mean, Great. Very strange thing. It's putting a blip on the history line for everybody to come. And with the conspiracy theories or just theories in general, I mean, you said there's like people that are just writing it off as not real. That's crazy. That's easy to say fuck off because, coming from someone who had it, that's easy. But then somewhere in the middle, there's the conspiracy theorists, like you said, where, okay, they can see that it's a real virus and it's really spreading, but their angle is more of where it came from or maybe what's the reason for it. And they're split between completely natural, made in a lab, and all this. And you watch so many movies and contrived stories where, even all the way back to Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys.
Yep.
Just all, and then there's obviously a huge list of these kind of stories where viruses are purposely thrown out into the world to, whatever the reason, population control and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard to completely buy into that because it seems like it's just from a movie and not from reality. But obviously we've seen with Star Trek from the 60s and how, there's a cool show where they show like fun made up science fiction things like ion drive and flip phones and all that stuff that in the 60s were completely bizarre and made up, how they've become reality. So there could be some kind of similarity to these, conspiracy movies where, everyone's writing this, ooh, what if a scientist unleashed a virus and it took out millions of people? That came from someone's mind, obviously for a fictional reason, but clearly it could be based on something real or turn into something real. So I don't really want to take a side and say I believe it, I disbelieve it, because I'm perfectly fine with saying I don't know. It's not for us to decipher. It would be really just another check mark in just being completely disgusted at humankind that if they're just purposely making this. Totally. It's weird, but the fact that we have to deal with is that we're being hit with it, and it's taking out old people. And I'm worried for my mom. She's 80. And the way I felt when I had it. And I never had to go to the hospital or the emergency, but I was hit hard. Like I said, I was in bed for over 3 weeks, and somebody 80 years old gets that. I don't know, it doesn't look very good. So that's the reality we're faced with and the facts we're faced with. And so I just kind of, like you said, you like to be fact-based and science kind of. And so I'm a little more narrow. I just kind of deal with what's at hand and what I can gather, and all the spooky things, just let them sort out through time. I mean, they're still not going to figure out why JFK was shot or
where's Jimmy Hoffa. You know, this is the thing. There's all these things out there that have far more questions than we'll ever have answers, and the JFK one is truly fascinating. You know, I'm sure there's a very simple explanation, to be honest with you, when it's all said and done, but there's a whole industry around that, entertainment industry and conspiracy industry about the JFK thing. And as I say, I do dive into the alien thing a little bit, and especially with Bob. Have you been following some of this stuff that Bob Lazar has been talking about, where he worked at Area 51?
No.
So, like, there is some guys out there talking about some things that would typically be classified as conspiracies. There's some pretty straight faced, the corduroy and wool vest guys. You know what I mean? The guys who just don't want to get involved in the mass media. They're coming out and saying, no, the alien thing is actually quite credible, and we do have alien craft. And the Pentagon recently acknowledged, I can't remember the words that they used, but they used very fancy language to describe UFOs. And they said, yeah, they're basically there. And they did that at the height of the George Floyd thing, and the looting, and then the Corona thing. They basically did it at the height of that, so as though our attention was so absorbed by those two things that are going on in civilization in our societies at the moment. And they released this bit of information that would probably have caused a bit of a meltdown amongst significant portions of the population had those other two things not been going on. So
Isn't that weird? I mean, yeah. Yeah, is it like by design? Is there some mastermind that knows how to play the card at just the right time to fuck with people, or is it just the weirdest coincidence? I don't know if the story broke outside of the U.S., but back in 2001, there was a senator that was accused of seducing this very young. I think she was like 22, so we're not talking like a child, but a very, very young woman, very young girl. Seducing her, young mistress. He bought her the receipts, the paper trail showed he bought her some wristwatch. And then when the girl turned up dead, he was a senator with money and good connections and power. So maybe he made it all go away. Then they found the watch in a dumpster behind a hotel that she was seen on the security camera. And there's this whole thing about, hey, did this senator kill this girl because it was his mistress? And then the planes crashed into the towers, and it went away pretty quick, but there was a brief blip of people saying that the whole 9/11 was a cover-up for this Gary Condit senator because he was accused of killing this girl. And it was the same kind of thing, like you're saying. It's like, well, when one thing's happening, let's throw the other thing out there and just, take advantage of this big misdirection and this mass confusion. And it's like that just really... just hook, line, and sinker to all the conspiracy theorists, man. They love that because then it's like, oh yeah, the mastermind is controlling us, man. Don't wake up, man. Don't listen to that shit.
Yeah, I know. As I say, I force myself. Like, we all do it. It's late at night. You're on your iPhone or you're on Android. You're trying to go to sleep, and you sort of stumble across all these weird bullshit sites. And because I've just finished uni, okay, so meaning that I've been so used to putting things in an academic format with referencing, site sources, but credible sources, this sort of thing. And I do a deep dive on some. I just pick one or two occasionally. Whatever the insert conspiracy theory here, but I go, I'm going to go to the end of the rabbit hole with this one here, and of course there's no credible evidence anywhere. It seems like since the internet has been put into the palm of our hands with these things, we just love creating distractions for ourselves, and the bigger the better. You know what I mean? Like.
Well, and there's also the morbid factor, that kind of morbid curiosity, all the way back to not only people enjoying horror stories and ghost and zombie stories, but just even like roller coaster seekers and adrenaline junkies. Like, it's that need for the extreme, that kind of curiosity is how far can we push it? How far beyond normal do things go? Talk about it, look at it, experience it, and like, just the fixation with serial killers and people that are, amused with roadkill and carcasses or autopsies, just broad range, but it's under the umbrella of this morbid curiosity. And it's easy that you could see how people, they're almost sucking at an empty straw, waiting for the drops of what they want. It's like the conspiracy theorists and the and the people that seek out this stuff, it's like they're a little baby bird with the mouth open, just waiting for the stuff to drop out, and they'll
Great
take it,
analogy.
whatever it is. They'll take it, they'll run with it, and they don't care about fact checking or backing up the story or anything. They don't care, because if it fits what they feel, like it's, oh, zombies are real because, well, that's your own, because scientifically, you're
Yeah.
dead, you're dead. Zombies don't walk. Well, I don't know, because voodoo. Well, okay, there you go. So yeah, it's weird. It's how people are. And
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure the storytellers of the old days, even before radio and the old cathode and all that, I'm sure the campfire eldermen were telling stories of how the freaking mammoth trapped them in a cave, and they fought their way out. I mean, just people want stories, man, and they don't care if they're real or not, as long as it's freaking exciting.
I was just before we talk about the music, I'll make this last point, okay? Because I was talking to my
Oh
wife
yeah,
about
it's an
this.
interview about music. All right.
No, and it's fine by me. God, I love talking about all this stuff. But I was talking. I've studied enough ancient history to realise that we brag. We're braggadocios, human beings. Like whenever we form this sentient consciousness that we've got that separates us from all of the beasts of the earth and gives us this singularity that we have. We know ourselves unto which that we are not. We have that perspective on things. But I was going through just about all hieroglyphs are bullshit. Meaning, no, they were done back then, but they're just somebody saying, "I am this, I am that," and we know from other historical records, like fighting against the Persians or the Hyksos or whatever it might have been, or the Hittites or what have you. No, you're not. You're just bragging about it now. There are so few independent records that are out there, but just about all records that we have were written by the victors, or they're written by somebody who wants to push a particular perspective. So PR and propaganda and potentially even conspiracies, mate, they're as old as we've been doing cave paintings.
And it's just really comes down to people are just always people. I mean, you
Yeah.
want to you find the Mayan codex and the hieroglyphs, like you said, and all this stuff, and you want to take it for face value, because why would our ancestors lie or brag or
Hmm.
exaggerate? Of course they were just like us. Fox News and all the crap that people hate these days was going on the cave wall, probably.
It was, you're right.
They're just fucking people, and we're their descendants. And if we're bragging and lying, well, they were. So history is great to study, man, but you got to take it with a grain of salt and know that people are always freaking big headed about things. Like you said, the victor always tells the history, and
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, it's very strange, mate. Yeah, so. But look, I appreciate Tara organising this for us, actually, mate, because I've got in my 40s. I've been following. I'm a bass player too, so. And I've got to say, you were one of those bass players that I didn't even bother trying to copy. It was impossible. Between yourself, Steve Harris, Giorgio, you're part of that pantheon as far as I'm concerned. I don't try to flatter you too much, but I'm sure you realise that bass players out there put you on
Or
a
I don't
pedestal.
believe it.
I've sat down and I've listened with headphones. I remember doing this. I remember listening to Overactive Imagination and just thinking, oh my god. I mean, there was yourself and Roger Patterson. Of course, I don't know whether you knew Roger, but you guys were just smashing the paradigm of what the expectation was from an extreme metal and a heavy metal bass player. Apart from I sort of go work with me here when I make this point. You sort of picked up the baton that I think Bob Daisley laid, that he put down, in terms of being very prominent but very melodic and never taking away from the song. I'm sure you're aware these days, mate, there's all of these, so-called jazz bass players who are playing heavy metal these days and extreme metal, and it's just, but it feels like note overload and that doesn't serve the song, whereas you're one of those bassists where I've never felt like any note you've ever played, as busy as you are, has ever been out of place. And you're probably about, between you and Steve and Giorgio, mate, I think that's about it. And I'm sure there's Mingus and other guys too out there, but I haven't listened to their music as intensely as I have Giorgio, yourself, and Steve Harris's bass line. So, look, Overactive Imagination, great track. I appreciate that in these COVID times you've got to sort of spread the word and you've got to do more videos. And I truly hope you do more videos, because you've no doubt seen there's a lot of people that try to play like you do on YouTube and offer these tributes and stuff, but they never quite get there. So I guess, My first question for you is you have to be aware at this point that you're more or less the extreme and heavy metal bass iconoclast. And I know I know you're a fairly modest fellow, but surely to goodness you can recognise your influence in other people's playing.
Yeah, I do. Thanks for the massive compliments, by the way. They're not lost on
Mm-hmm.
me. I know, especially coming from you being a bass player, you kind of see it from our side of the fence and stuff. And you, your compliments were also demonstrating that you recognize the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't, fall into a role like that. You got to work hard to get there. As far as the jazzy bass players, like doing all the crazy stuff, I think I'm kind of safe from getting into note overload is because I'm just not as good as them. So I think by playing with the pedal all the way
Jeez,
down,
yeah.
I think that puts me right in the level of maybe just on the cusp of overplaying. But although I've been accused of that, it depends on who the guitarist
Oh
and
yeah,
all that
yeah.
is. And it's funny about the comparison about Bob Daisley. Um, you know, when metal evolved into, I think about mid '90s, or maybe I don't know exactly, early '90s, somewhere in the '90s, metal hit this kind of standard, and when it hit that standard, you could look back on just even shorter than yearly increments and kind of hear the sound changing.
Mm-hmm.
You could really tell the difference between like something like Metal Church or something that came out in 80 or 82, Angel Witch kind of stuff. And then you could hear the difference as it evolved into Accept or Merciful Fate, and then you could hear that difference as it got into Megadeth or Testament. I mean, there's a real noticeable step increment there. And then once the 90s hit up until about now, it's it's really level. Just a
Mm-hmm.
slight degree of involvement. And I'm illustrating that because that standard, once it hit this long plateau, or it's, I'm not saying it's completely still. There is a slightly upgrade involvement to it. But once it hit that, there became this accepted standard for the way guitars and drums were moving along this evolutionary trajectory. And both of those standardized sounds of guitar and drums, respectively, completely pushed bass out of the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
Guitars became kind of more all frequency encompassing, pushing instead of sharing and complementing guitar and bass, then the guitar took over those frequencies and pushed the bass out of the audible spectrum. And then drums, of course, with the kick drums being more clicky and getting out of the sub realm,
Yeah.
and getting up into this very attacky sound, and just the overall volume of the overheads and everything way up in the trebly realm. I mean, it's pushing bass guitar out and out and out. And we used to use bass players like Bob Daisley and um, I'm at a loss, but that's, yeah, one guy and all them. But we'd use that as a comparison, saying, you know, take a song that he played on, mute the bass channel, and do you still recognize it? I mean, it's Crazy Train,
Yes. Yeah.
super iconic sound. If you mute the bass, you're going to recognize it right away. You're going to go, ooh, this is really weird. And, Maiden was like kind of a little bit of a little brother, but they were definitely part of the first ish wave of, Ozzy and Rainbow, Sabbath, Priest, Rush, Jethro Tull, Yes. This type of, you know, force of music where I'm sure the bass player didn't get those jokes. I'm sure he didn't have to fight for his decibels in the studio. It was
Mm-hmm.
just an accepted. It wasn't even really accepted. They weren't aware, because clearly everyone had their role and everybody was equally important. And it's more of a metal thing. I mean, rock kind of so, but once that new standard hit that part of the evolvement to where the bass got squished out sonically,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing is ever guilty of one reason, weather or science. There's always a multiple input. So coincidentally, there was also this wave of kind of, oh, I used to be a guitar player, but I got kicked over to the bass, or, oh, can my girlfriend join the band? We'll just have her,
Oh
sit
God,
on the
yeah.
back, up on the low E. This wave, I'm really treading this line delicately to not fall into the land of conceited comments, but
Oh no, but you're
it's
right.
true.
You're on point.
It's a true
Yeah.
fact. There's a lot of fucking bass players that kind of started and allowed and initiated this whole getting pushed to the background thing. Um, so yeah, it was really hard. I grew up pre new standard, like with a lot of
Yep.
guys you would say, definitely Jocko, Steve Harris, Chris Squire, Geddy Lee, guys like this that were a very, very, not only a big part of the song, but a major force in musicianship in general. And this is what I was aspiring to be when I was young. This is what I thought it would be, what I would grow into, because that's what was there. That was the
Yeah.
standard. And in my developmental years, and fortunately it was in my younger and more ambitious, slightly obnoxious developmental years, I carried that with me through the new standard and pushed, kind of like a shark. It's swimming right against the current the whole time, you know, taking on all the jokes about, oh, it's just bass. Oh, it's bass. Who cares? Taking all that on and still pushing through it. And, when you said, if I recognize now, from doing it for so many years, if I hear my
Hmm.
playing in younger guys and realize that I was kind of, at the forefront of, I don't know what to call it, new extreme metal or whatever,
Sure.
these new bass players that are really
Hmm.
standing out. I do, I like to claim some of the credit, not necessarily for being, a hot shot or playing hot licks or doing anything super magical, but really just for the overall attitude about it and the ability to just push forward and keep that flag of low end flying high amidst all the pressure of the new standard of metal,
Hmm.
and those are the guys that I'm always, I got their back and I'm encouraging them to keep going, because we could evolve the standard. We don't have to go back to old ways, but definitely a nod to the times where if you're going to be in the band, you're important. I mean, if metal bands don't want bass in their sound, just don't have a bass player.
Yeah.
That's
Great.
totally
Yeah.
fine with
Mm.
me. It's like, here's a new band with, 2, 3 guitar players, vocals, drums, and it sounds like, okay, cool. I could dig it. But then you put a bass player's photo on there, you put his name on the album, you see him on stage, and you don't hear it. I don't get it. We might as well have inaudible xylophone players
Yep.
and you know it's the same thing. If you're just taking up space, who cares? But if they're going to be on the stage playing, let's round it out. Let's hear them. And you're not just going to change the standard by pushing a fader. We need the guys to, you know,
Agreed. Yeah.
give that reason, yeah, to fight for those decibels. You need to play fucking tight as hell. You need to play something really interesting that's worth pushing the fader. And obviously it has to make sense, like you say, not a note overload.
Hmm.
Something really cool that is the mortar between the bricks and the foundation of all the instruments, and that's a modern bass player's role. We're no longer this part of the foundation. The drums are the rock bottom, and the guitar riffs are all the blocks, and the bass is just this
Hmm.
fluid mortar that links everything together. We're there in the background, and oh, we love this saying, in the pocket, but we hold it together, but without the mortar, looking for those little cracks and crevices to shine through. Then it's just a piece of plywood, I guess. Boring. So
Hmm.
you know that's kind
Great
of my
points.
whole overview of that bass player thing. It's um I was never on any kind of mission to be, to stand out and just kind of accrue accolades. I never wanted to be the man or the best, but I have no qualms in standing up, for just the strength of the movement, man. Just
Yeah, I'm
no,
hearing
just
you.
for bass players to be relevant and just, jokes are cool and jokes are funny, but I mean, it's really become a serious thing. I mean, I've worked with very, very few producers and engineers and fellow musicians. It takes a lot of convincing to get the sound. I mean, if you took my whole discography that I've done, my body of work, I mean, the majority of the stuff you can't really hear most of what I'm doing. So, you know, I could sit here and preach all I want, but I'm a bigger victim than a lot of guys anyway of
I
just
know.
being
Yeah.
completely lost in the mix.
Yeah, it's crazy because I have seen that you've been interacting with people on Facebook, and I think it's a great thing, by the way, especially regarding the production and the way the bass is buried on Human, which I thought, to be honest with you, was criminal. And I agree with every comment that you've posted on there in response to people who ask you questions about that, by the way. Because, look, we all love Chuck, and I think Chuck was a genius, but I think he got that wrong. I think he got that dead wrong. And that album is one of the few albums in the catalogue, certainly one of the few albums where your bass is kind of audible but still not quite there, that I probably lost track of these days. I can't listen to it that much anymore.
Zero. The original mix is zero audible. It's gone.
It's not there. But look, you obviously you've one of the questions was, did you have to fight to be audible? That I had. You've just given me a great response. You know, as a preamble to it, really, and I guess it's. Who is it that's the biggest pain in the ass? Because I've done enough studio work to know what you go. I've only done 2 or 3 serious sessions. You know, you've done hundreds of them, no doubt. But I like the amount of times, mate, that I did what I thought was a damn good bass line, and then to your point, you get the final mix back or the master's like, am I even on this? Is that? I mean, how often does that? I mean, obviously it happens to you a lot, but was there ever a point? Not. Was there ever a point? So look, I'm not picking on the guys in Testament here because I love Testament, great band and all the rest of it. But to me, that last album was a cracker album, except that I couldn't bloody hear you. So is it a fight ongoing? Like, to me, if you bring Steve Giorgio into the fold, turn that dial up because you've already got it. You know, so even in a setup like Testament, do you really have to fight to be heard? And I'll say I won't include these comments if you're uncomfortable afterwards. I'll just edit them out.
No. This is public knowledge, and it's actually something that's been addressed many times. So, but I want to actually ask you, in your question, you said the last album, but you weren't talking about the new one that just came out, because there's some bass pumping on the new one.
No, it might not have been the last one. Sorry, hang on, let me check, because I'm a shocker these days with, was it The Formation of Damnation? So Titans of Creation, yes, I can hear you on that one there, but the one previous, you were on that one, weren't you?
Yeah. That's the one we did. We recorded last summer, and the mix was ongoing for months, but there was a very concerted effort with getting the bass to where it is, and I had support of everybody in the band and the both studio engineers. I think it came out pretty damn good. Been getting feedback, compliments, criticisms about the bass, so I know it's definitely not lost. It's pretty good. The one before that we did in 2016, Brother of the Snake, is pretty good.
That's
as
the
well.
one. Yep. Yeah, I thought you could have been higher on that one. Sorry, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, that one's kind of like fluctuates per song, and even each song, it kind of fluctuates per part, you know, and depending on what else is there, what it's fighting through. But I would have to even chuck that one in an okay pile. Hey, girl. Yeah, neighbors or something.
All good. Yeah, we got a bull terrier who barks like that as well, so good.
Yeah, there's a big Doberman. She's my my ticket to youth. Yeah, I mean, when you get in your 50s, man, you gotta move a lot more than you used to in your life. So just go get a large breed, high energy puppy, man. That'll fix your fucking cardio.
Yeah, that's.
But anyway, I think Testament historically, they're really the batch of those first iconic albums. The bass was always prominent. Greggy was a really, he thumped with his thumb. On the low note, not like a slap R&B kind of dude, but he is using the same side of his thumb to hit that low E instead of the palm mute pick, jump, or just a regular do. He was like a ga. So that really sharp thumb smacking that low E just gave him a nice springy, boingy attack. Now, when the band's playing certain runs or, something a little more riffy, obviously kind of gets swirled in the wash, especially with those late 80 productions. It sounded like holding a drill next year
Oh
for
yeah,
most
yeah,
bands, not
yeah.
bagging on Testament. That was kind of the disgusting standard back then. We were just, new to the game, and no one could really produce a metal band back then. But so historically, Testament, from my part that I play in the band, it was never like changing the the character of the band to all of
Sure.
a sudden, it's not like I came in the band and said, okay, now they have bass. No, I would say the majority of the time, Testament was one of the metal bands where you could pick out the bass guitar. Um, Generally speaking, we could nitpick here and there where it got lost, but it was always pretty much there. So when I first came onto the band in '98, we started recording with Dave Lombardo from Slayer,
Yep.
and now that I could look back and see how it started and developed, I can easily say I showed up as me with my sound, and that wasn't the ticket for Testament sound, because the Gathering album that came out in '99, the bass is very round and a little too warm. Um, Basically, it's one of those things to where if you muted the bass track, yeah, you would notice an absence of something, but you don't hear definition. So it was a touchy point because everybody else in the band was like, "Of course, dude, we could hear you," because they're hearing this, low endy rumble, this
Yep.
kind of accentuation to their guitar or something. They're hearing something that's not part of their instrument, so therefore you can hear bass. Well, no, you can't hear the distinction of the instrument. And instead of just focusing on volume fader, I was thinking, and this is a good 15 years later when I got to really focus in on this and say, what went wrong there and what could I do? And I said, okay, well, Testament needs a Testament style bass, because I noticed the old albums and how the bass was there. Now I could never just turn a knob and sound like Greg. He has a very unique way of playing, and even though I'm replicating and emulating his bass lines, I'm not there to be him. So when it came time to put my own stuff to their music, I wanted to be me still and have my own sound, but do it in the context of Testament the best way possible in that little bubble. And so I laid out about 6 or 7 of my bass guitars. One of the songs we were getting ready for, I think it was the title track from Brotherhood of the Snake, I took about a 20-second part and played bass number one, then
Yep.
started a new track and just created A, B, C, D. There's a whole line. I think it was about 6 or 7 bass guitars playing the same part, so I could just go down the line and mute and hear how each bass reacted with its own personality. Same riff, same part, same signal chain, same settings, everything. The only thing different was the instrument itself. And it landed on about 2 or 3 that were really nice. And then once I, focused further on those couple that were really doing the trick, there was one that stood out more. And that it was funny because it's, out of all these crazy instruments, multi-string, fretted, fretless, active, all the options, the one that it turned out to be was this vintage 1978 completely stock Rickenbacker, passive.
Jeez. Yep.
Just no one ever changed a single part on this bass. It's completely stock. I mean, it's just pickup wire to a pot to a cord. There's no preamp, no battery, no push pull, no center click, no, just all the knobs full up, passive bass. Of course, it got processed after that, but slightly, just overdrive, compression, just things to make it bite and, amplified, obviously. But that was the ticket, man. And the recording engineer was so happy because that bass found its spot on its
Yep.
own. It wasn't like all this processing to get it to find that shelf so it did it. And then Andy, the mixing engineer, was in love with it, got major compliments. So we were on the right track. And then, the one we did, this new one, it was a combination of Rickenbacker and Ibanez, but
Okay.
predominantly Rickenbacker. a little newer model, but the same idea. Completely stock, passive. Um, with some nice overdrive. Pretty low on the drive, but using the overdrive to give it this mid-rangey kind of saturation, and it was the ticket, man, and it fit right in there. Everybody in the band liked it. Both engineers liked it, and it shows in the mix. It popped out. So
Yep.
I had the luxury to find that. I don't know if every bass player can do that, but that's what it took me to get to that point.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, it was Brotherhood of the Snake I was talking about. The last album, and I remember I had a good chat to Eric about you playing on that. He was thrilled with it, by the way. I had a chat to him for the podcast, and look, I said, but I think I'm trying to remember the response. It's out there for anybody who wants to listen to it on the podcast. But so, what's it like working with Steve? And he said you basically just let him do what he needs to do. I mean, who can give you instruction? You're pretty much the man. And look, I'm somebody who's really studied your playing across the Death albums, and but I think an album that really gets overlooked, and you probably know where I'm headed here, is the Control Denied album. Because for me, as a fan, that's your masterwork. That one right there. That's the album that I keep coming back to and back to and back to. And I feel like it falls through the cracks a bit. And I know Relapse have done some work to release the album and to bring out T-shirts to honour it and all the rest of it. And I just felt like at that stage I understood where Chuck wanted to take his music, and to have you along for that journey rather than Scott was the right move, I think, after The Sound of Perseverance. And I'll go even deeper and say that my opinion is that your bass line on Breaking the Broken is the extreme and heavy metal bass masterwork of all time, in my view. Okay, unbelievable.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like I was just very comfortable with my buddy Chuck's riffs, and he was the first guy in my life that just completely pushed me the whole time. He never held back. He was like that to everybody. He really, really valued individuality. It was a bit of from a hippie point of view, to where the odder you could be, the more odd of a person you could be, and the more quirky, and basically the less trendy you were, the more he appreciated you. It was funny. We were on a tour in '93 after the release of Individual Thought Patterns, and we had a pretty good package deal in Europe. It was Death, Cannibal Corpse, Carcass, Tiamat, and Gorefest. And it was this death metal touring package. And, and I looked at the Carcass guys and the Cannibal Corpse guys, complete, even, same age, same upbringing, same background. I mean, nobody's looking up to either. We were slogging along, paying the dues at the same time. But, Alex Webster's a good buddy of mine. We're like total bass boyfriends. And he kind of is like the poster child for death metal knowledge. I mean, this guy, he lives in that realm. Like I'm opposite of him, to where I have appeared on death metal records, but I'm just so far from being expert or anything on death metal. I'm not really a death metal guy. I just made friends with a lot of them and enjoy playing the physical extreme style. But Alex is the expert, and he lived the life. He looked the look. And his comment about me and Chuck and Gene, and our guitar player was Ralph Santalla. On that particular tour was Ralph's first foray into extreme side of music. He came from kind of a part your hair on the side, kind of, pretty boy rock world. He came from that right into death. So he definitely didn't look the look. And when you got the four of us together, Alex's comment was just so awesome. He goes, "Man, you guys are like the top of the pyramid of death metal. Your name of your band is even iconic. I mean, you're freaking called Death. You should be just the absolute, poster child for death metal." And he goes, "But you're just so different than that. You guys look like freaking gypsies," because we were wearing ponchos and sweats, and Gene had a scarf back then. Walk with the cane, and we did not look like, what was and still is the average death metal guy, or and that's that was not only, the door was open to that kind of person, look wise, playing wise, point of view wise. That was Chuck's doing. You know, Gene came from Dark Angel, and he might have been a little bit more hard edge attitude with Dark Angel, maybe a little similar for myself in Sadus. Maybe we had a little bit more of a band attitude. But once you got around Chuck, man, that was not required at all. Just be yourself. In fact, let's push the goofiness. Let's kind of welcome the craziness, and that was true for, decorating his riffs and you know, finishing the albums and stuff. That completely carried through. So when you got Octopus Arm, Sean Reinert, and Gene following up with all this crazy stuff, and you know, extreme isn't always just straight ahead brutality and speed. It's also extreme kookiness, and Chuck worshiped that stuff and he welcomed it. And I was definitely coming from that kind of organic, non-groomed, non-manicured kind of type of playing. And so if I had a wacky idea that seemed totally, totally unexpected for that part, to most people, instead of Chuck saying like, "Oh gosh, that's weird, I don't know, how's it going to go over, he would say, "Yeah, not only is that great and it stays, but why don't you try to just even make it more, just put some more stuff on there." I, I do these meandering lines, but I try to create it with some kind of repetition to, even though the bass line is up and out of the pocket, with the repetition, it becomes the bass line. And then Chuck would hear that and he'd be like, "Hey, instead of doing the same thing all 4 times on this part, make a different one on each one." Or, look at the drums. He hits a splash on 3 and he hits a china on 4. Why don't you find something? And he's just pushing. And I always had that kind of encouragement from him at a young age. And I think that's where I felt at home with that style of playing, and, was kind of, nurtured to grow with that style. And so the times I popped in and out and worked with him over the years, obviously his last recording on Control Denied, he wasn't around for that. We weren't sitting next to each other doing that. Hey, do this on 2 and do this on 4. We weren't doing that. He was up in New York getting radiation, and I was down. I was able to keep company with Shannon and Richard a little bit, and Jim Morris. So I wasn't totally on my own, but I didn't have the man with me. And so, and I also came into that project filling in for a bass player that already completed his tracks.
Yeah, I know.
The album was fully mixed and past its deadline to be turned in. Chuck drove to the studio and he actually erased the bass track. He could have just waited for me to come and record over them. No, he actually created a void. He was so mad at Scott. He just completely took him out of the album and told me, "Hurry up, learn it, get down here. We're way past deadline."
Yeah.
So I wanted to come in, and make it worth it. You just don't show up to someone who's erased another man's bass tracks and just paint by numbers, man. You got to come there and you got to be there for what you're called in for. And we would finish songs and call up his place in New York and put the phone up to the speaker monitor. And about 2 or 3 songs in only, I mean, we were a couple songs in. God, I wish we could have just dropped an MP3 and emailed it to him, let him listen to it on headphones. But no, we had to push play and and we're talking 2000, so it's not even ancient history. But anyway, that's how we operated. And so he got the hang of it after a couple songs. Like, okay, now he adjusted his way. Like, okay, I have to listen to the bass mix through this, stupid phone through a studio monitor. But we got a couple songs in and song ended and I just heard dead silence. I'm like, crap, the call dropped. We're gonna have to start over. And I was like, hello. And then I heard him like he was blowing his nose or something. And I was like, "Chuck, what's up? Did you hear it?" And he was actually crying. And he said, "Man," he goes, "that's the best get well card I ever had." And when you're completely healthy and having a great time, me and Jim Morris were sitting there having a ball, creating all these bass lines and decorating this album. And then we call up Chuck and push play. The dude's going through radiation with something that ended up killing him a year later, and he's telling me like, "Oh man, this is thank you for that. I was just like, I felt like this freaking big, man, tiny,
Wow.
like
Yeah.
what kind of comment is that? How do you, we finally got through the call and got off, and me and Jim were like, I just looked at my bass sitting on the stand. I'm like, man, we're gonna have to go for a beer or something because I can't play right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I was floored. It just, like, poor fucking guy, man. He's just suffering, and he's brought to tears and just wanted to be there and wanted to do what we always did since we first met back in '86. We were exchanging ideas and riffs, and it was really difficult, man. But I wanted to, step up to the plate and deliver for him. And he didn't give me a lot of guideline to start out. He just basically said he wanted it really spidery.
He's got the right guy.
People that know Chuck would know that one adjective is enough for the whole album. You could take that and run with it, and I did. But he wanted the bass lines to be very spidery, so the fingers were crawling on like spiders on the wall. So yeah, that was a really, really cool album. Not only to do, but the final product, man. It was hard to live up to recording something as iconic as Individual Thought Patterns as a 25-year-old. And not that I'm out to, I'm not here to outdo myself each time, but you always feel, you feel like you want to improve and you want to better yourself. And when people keep pointing to an album you did 30 years ago, you're like, okay, I get it. I haven't been wasting my time in the meantime, but that's fine. So I put the Control Denied up there in the top 3, 4.
Awesome. Yeah, great to hear.
Yeah. So I'm with you on that one, man. But that long-winded story was my point of view of it. So
it's a beautiful story, mate. And look, it's very sad. I've spoken to Tim Amar about this. I think Tim is criminally overlooked as a vocalist. He's got the voice that if I could sing, I'd want to borrow his voice, if that makes sense. In terms of, I put you up on the dais as one of the greatest of all time on the bass. And I think if I could play bass like that, I'd probably rest a lot easier, you know what I mean? But same thing with Tim's voice. So that album is just a absolute monster, and it is such a fitting... I mean, you got to... I'm sure you recognise this, but you guys had the last word in Chuck's overwhelming legacy. That's how important the work you did on that album.
I'm quite aware of that. I know that I was part of the last standing lineup for him.
Yeah.
I think that was important for him because we were friends when we were 17, 18 years old, and I was, like I said, in and out over his whole career. I worked on a lot more of his albums than I appeared on.
Mm-hmm.
I was called in for pre-production for Symbolic, Sound of Perseverance stuff, just bounce ideas off of and be, the buddy that sits next to him. And most of the time it was like, fuck yeah, Chuck, good job. I mean, I'm not stealing any credit I don't deserve. I mean, he was 99.9% completely solid in his vision. But even somebody so, visionary as Chuck still needed a buddy to just say, hey, what do you think? You like this? What would you do? And stuff like that. And so it's just more of just a bro to just have conversation with him, but because of that, I was called in often to be there, and different reasons why I didn't stick it out and follow through for the studio session or for certain tours, but each little instance is its own unique thing. But it was kind of cool for me to sum it up for his last record and be there, as his buddy till the very end. It's not lost on me by any measure. It's a very important part of my career to have worked with him. I mean, it's funny because, Randy Rhoads and all these guys, as soon as they pass, they become huge icons, and the death of someone seems to do that. It kind of elevates the person's, kind of godlike status, and it definitely elevates the band's music when somebody dies. But with Chuck's case, it took a very long time. It was a slow brewing process, when he was here slogging on the last Death record, like the last time Death was on a stage was 1998, and there was nowhere near the status that Death is now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the amount of tattoos people have, the shirts you see at the concerts, and just the overall love and admiration people have for the guy wasn't there when he was here. And, you know, at the turn of the century, it just, I guess people kept defaulting on that. You know, nobody really took that torch from Chuck. And so it was the embers, you know, still cooking there, but the fire didn't really pop out till years later. And that kind of opened the door for us to do the Death to All, you know, tribute, the memorial tribute to him. And
Yeah.
man, what an experience that is. And, you know, we always say if he's watching from above, this and that, or if he could be here again. And I would just love to see his reaction to his fame, his
Yeah.
status level, because he wasn't here to experience, you know, I don't know if YouTube was around in the late 90s, but you can look up guys playing drums, guitar, bass, vocals, anything of a Death song. The list is endless of people
Mm-hmm.
performing, like sitting on the side of their bed playing Death stuff. And if Chuck could see that, especially that side
Yeah.
of his worship, if he could see the younger side of it, you know, the people with a cell cam just playing a song on the side of their bed instead of on a stage trying to look like a fancy boy, you know, he would really, really love that, because he was a humble guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he would love to see, you know, his influence, especially to the young people. He's well known as an animal lover, but he was the same with kids. He liked kids, he liked young people. And when fans would come to the show, if there was like a 13-year-old, you know, he'd have like this impenetrable arc around him with people, you know, holding out the CD or album like, Chuck, sign. And he would span it really quick with his eyes. If he saw a 13-year-old or some, boom, straight to that one first, like, hey, and he would chat him up and just agonizingly make everyone else just wait. But he enjoyed that contact with the younger people. So, yeah, I'd be really weird if he was here to experience it, but oh well, you know.
Yeah, and just not to be. And you make some great points through that about, and I've made this point so often, you know, there's this endemic amongst young people feeling a bit lost and a bit confused about life. But to your exact point, you know, Chuck and Ralph, and I'll talk about Ralph in the sec because I knew Ralph and he used to talk about you a bit, I've got to say, but in very positive light. But
I'm sure not, but that's okay, because that's how our friendship was based.
But just about Chuck there, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I understand your perspective from what you think Chuck's point of view would be, because I love it when I see these 13 and 14-year-olds in Indonesia, and Brazil, and Chile, all these sort of countries, even in Iran, on the side of their bed, you know, to your point, just putting the dodgy old Nokia camera in front of them, they're just ploughing away at something that you've been a part of, and mate, it's those things that just give you a little bit of light in the day, don't you? Because once you accomplish that, once a kid sits down and actually, it doesn't matter how well or how badly, or if I can use that for that expression, it doesn't matter how incompetent they might be to be playing it. The point is they're trying, and I think that's what Chuck would have appreciated. And you know, look, you mentioned Ralph through there, and I wouldn't say that I knew Ralph as well as someone like yourself or Bill Hudson, that's for sure. But I had a number of conversations. Well, I had a number of conversations with him over the years and email exchanges and the like, and I was talking to him about bringing him down here for some guitar clinics, because I know he was very keen on doing that sort of stuff. And his favourite city, he told me, was Perth. And I'm on the other side. I'm on the Gold Coast, so about 5,000 kilometres away. But you know, he really wanted to come down and do some of that stuff. But then we know what happened, and he was telling me, I think it was in Sebastian Bach's band. You were both in that band for a bit, and you're in Europe and you're drinking. I think he said, I don't want to misquote him here, but the rest of the band were fairly stiff and a bit prudish, and you guys are up the back drinking vodka and orange juice at the back of the tour bus, that is, screwdrivers, and how much fun he had with you through those times. So you guys had a great brotherhood as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Ralph lived for comedy and all things humor, and yeah, and as you noticed, a lot of drinking as well. So those two things seem to go together. I'm sure Australians can relate to
Absolutely.
drinking and shit and hamming it up. Sure. So we were really trying to outdo each other on pissing other people off, make each other laugh by being annoying to other people. And yeah, some of the stories were fucking amazing. Yeah, drinking screwdrivers in the back of the van, long drives, and we got a Discman with one side of a headphone each. You know, I got the right side, he's got the left side, and we're listening to a CD. The particular anecdote I'm thinking is when Jorn Lande, the singer from Norway, Ralph had worked with him personally. I don't know him personally. He's like if David Coverdale and Ronnie James Dio had a baby, man. This Jorn is an amazing singer. Actually filled in for a Sabbath concert right when Dio died. So he's got credit. He's got the credit of the old gods. And so we're listening to one of his solo CDs, Jorn CD, and just so Ralph knows him personally from working with him on his own, you know, in his band Millennium.
Sure. Yep.
And I'm just super fan, and we're just both sitting there worshiping this guy. And 2 bench seats in front of us is the guy, you know, we're in a band called Sebastian Bach. It's not even, I mean, the fucking band name is the singer's name. And we're talking about a guy who, you know, it's all about him, you know, 24 hours, it's all about him. And it's, yeah. So we're in a van with ex Skid Row singer who wants to be constantly worshipped near and far, and we're in the back just going, oh God, I got goosebumps, man. This fucking singer is just the best fucking singer in the world. And we're just, I mean, and it's also the vodka bottle and the orange juice lid and the paper bag blowing up and down the aisles. It's more than just, I mean, it's the mess and the clinking of bottles and the just the oh God. Sebastian didn't really say anything to us directly, but you know, the other guys that were just like kind of sitting in their seats, hugging their backpack, trying to catch a nap or something, you know, we all spill out of the van and go to our separate dressing rooms or whatever. And of course they came up to us, me and Ralph, and they're like, what are you guys doing to him? Why were you doing that? We're like, doing what? We were just rocking, man. We're having a drink, listening to Jorn. What's your problem? They're like, dude, you guys are saying like, oh, he's the best singer in the world. This guy's God. And it's like, you realize you got Sebastian Bach sitting in the front seat, staring dead ahead, just with this scowl on his face, just seething with, you know, unnecessary jealousy. It was funny. No, it's funny because we definitely didn't do it on purpose. We love Sebastian. Yep. He's a total friend. We were playing in his band, representing his music. We love the dude, but just the fact that we did that inadvertently and pissed someone off, that's what we lived for. Just, you know, being drunk, obnoxious, and very annoying and borderline rude. I mean, that was me and Ralph to the world. And I wish I could go on and on with some of those stories, man. But, yeah, that could make for a boring interview. But, yeah, me and Ralph, we yeah. The dirty dogs, man. We were a couple dirty dogs, that's for sure.
You know what I like, mate, is when I talk to him about these stories, he laughed the same way you are. I know how much he enjoyed it. And he was here, you know, guys like Ralph were here to raise hell. They were really here to take no prisoners and remind us that life was worth living. And I think he's one of those guys, Chuck absolutely too, but with Ralph, because I actually kind of knew him, he's one of those guys where the world's a bit of a, you know, the light's just a bit dimmer for the lack of their presence.
Yeah.
You know, and
he's the kind of guy that I'm sure you got a friend from childhood to where you make each other laugh so hard you can't breathe. And you try to quell the laughter a little to catch your breath, and you look over and he's over there suffocating with tears coming down his face, and it just makes the muscles cramp up again, and you start all over and you're like, fuck you, dude, stop, man, stop. I can't breathe. Hey, that's me and him together. We would just laugh like complete fucking idiots together. I mean, we were just so stupid laughing like that. But man, I think it was cathartic because it was just, you really can't find that kind of just complete full body laughter with everyone you meet, you know. And yeah, he was a funny guy. And and he was a well-read guy. You know, I'm gonna dance around using simple words like smart or intelligence because he's a fucking moron. But he was pretty well-read, and he had a pretty vast knowledge of things, and he didn't let me get away with simple dad jokes. You know, it had to be pretty unique, highbrow humor. You know, he would give me full credit when I came up with something really original and good level. You know, he'd be like, "Oh, now that's a good one." You know, he'd always tell me, "Okay, now that's good humor." But yeah, the standard was held high around him, so the challenge was on, man, and that just caused me to go into complete absurd, disgusting levels. You know, just things that just you're not supposed to say in life, and that's what would get him, and that's what would get me my points.
Yeah,
Yeah,
look,
me and Ralph, yeah. Oop.
yeah, yeah,
So, there you are.
it's so. I mean, God, I hate to bear with me here. I hate to put it down on things again, but you know, Scott Clendenin, Sean, Ralph, Chuck, you know, they're all gone now. You know, so we've lost some people that are still incredibly important to music and are continuously influential. But you know, to your point earlier, you know, we are getting older. I'm in my 40s and I'm probably feeling the way you do in your 50s. I have to go swimming almost every day just to feel sort of normal, you know, do my
Yeah.
laps, you know, a kilometre every day or thereabouts just to sort of feel normal. But God, who was I talking to that made the point that all these extreme and death metal drummers? I mean, Gene can probably do it because he's inhuman, you know, he's a bionic man. But most people are going to have to start slowing down at some point. You know, Pete from Morbid Angel and the like. But you know, for yourself, do you see yourself in the nearer to mid future playing music that isn't so heavy and isn't so extreme, or is this your lot these days, do you think?
God, I hope so. Fucking hope so, man. I, I mean, I don't mean to throw cliches randomly, but when you say been there, done that, it's like I would love. I mean, I'm, I've, I'm lucky that I'm still a requested bass player. I'm still getting
Yeah,
session jobs, and they're predominantly, extreme and very difficult music. And I know that that's where I've built up, my that's my repertoire, man. That's my resume. That's the word I'm looking for. Sorry, Ralph. Uh, but I know I don't want to use a negative connotation such as pigeonholed in this style of music, but sometimes it feels like it, and I've you've seen me attempt to spread wide. I mean, we just talked about Sebastian. I mean, playing with a guy from Skid Row is, nothing like playing in bands like Autopsy or,
sure. Yep.
or something, insert band name of extreme, super fast stuff or whatever. Um, and there's other examples of that. I even put together my own kind of somewhat of a weird kind of a jazz fusion group. That's back in the 90s already. So now we're talking ancient history, but I mean, it was there and we had a lineup and we were gigging and, it was a real band and yeah, so I've tried to, you know, spread out and, you know, jump jump to different limbs of the tree of music or whatever. And I would love to keep doing that. I'd love to play, Motley Crue style of metal where it's just wide open, or Bob Daisley. There's a little less, a little better comparison. Well, I didn't want to get into the image thing, but Motley Crue is, if you never saw them, I always use them as this example. If you never saw a single picture or video of Motley Crue, you would swear they're a pretty freaking heavy band. Their image kind of takes away from their heaviness, if that makes sense. But yeah, something like Bark at the Moon kind of metal, where it's fun rock but heavy. Stuff like that is really fun to play. It's not super demanding, and I think it would be nice to kind of float off into the sunset playing anything that's just pleasant to listen to, whether it's metal or fusion or rock or what. I don't really care about the genre, but the ability level of what's required, I don't know. It's it's getting time to pass the torch on to the young the young lions. They seem to be more the new wave of upper echelon tech bass player. They seem to be into a little lighter attack and a lot more tapping
Yeah.
integrated into this flutter, this kind of tickling thing.
Yep.
I'm slamming the freaking strings. I have issues to deal with compression and throwing
Yeah, I'm the
spikes.
same. I'm the same issue. Yeah.
Yeah, back when we used to bury the needle on analog tapes, that was never a problem. And digital came out and said, "Fuck you, you play too hard." And I'm like, "Damn it."
Hmm.
So, I don't really see too many players of that kind of, pizzicato attack of me, but the attitude of sticking out of the music, kind of back to the earlier question, those type of bass players, they're kind of parallel and necessary to where the music's going. I'm not really keeping up with that style. I'm from a little bit older day,
Yeah.
and so that makes me think, maybe instead of trying to emulate, and stay too relevant, I think I'd like to, kind of ease up and play something a little more similar to what, kind of going back to the, childhood development time and play something that just fucking rocks. I'd like to do that, but as
Hmm.
long as I'm still relevant and still requested, I'll keep the chops up. I can still play fast. So as
Oh,
long as
good.
the
Yeah.
mechanism's
Yeah.
still there, I'll still utilize it.
Yeah. Have you ever been approached by like a Billy Joel or a Phil Collins type to perform?
No, never.
Is that right? That really surprises me, mate. Because I know Lee Sklar, I think his name is a great bassist, but he's not you. I mean, this is the point. I love. Oh God, who was David Bowie's bass player for a little bit? Not the Black Lady, sorry. Who was in Gang of Four, but Will Lee. Yeah,
Oh,
Will
well,
Lee.
Lee.
Yeah, Will Lee. That sort of thing. Was there ever a moment in time where, okay, you're doing this extreme metal stuff and the death metal stuff, Sadus and some of the death stuff, but was there a sliding doors moment where you could have been sort of sucked into that vortex, that massive world that Will Lee and all that? That didn't happen?
Never. The only thing that was even just super remotely close was I had a I don't know how to say it right. I had a connection tried to get me the Ozzy Osbourne gig.
Oh, wow. Oh, God, you would have been magnificent in that. Yeah, jeez.
Yeah, that's not like, I mean, Ozzy isn't super far removed from Testament, Death, Sebastian Bach. Ozzy's not. It's not like we say Billy Joel or David Bowie. Yeah, that's way down the
Mm,
road. Ozzy's huge. Obviously, the biggest difference would be the size of the crowd and all that stuff. But the music wasn't that big of a difference. But to me, it was like, holy crap. It was obviously never ever meant to be. They had a short list of two guys they wanted. The second guy was the guy who called me and said, "I don't even want this audition. You should do it." And so I took that uh, opportunity to kind of try it. But they got the guy. Their list of two, they got their number one guy. That's when Blasco got the gig. So even the number two guy on their very short list who they wanted didn't even have really a chance anyway. So
yep.
I wouldn't even say I had a chance, but I know that, like I said, the second guy called me and said, "I would look stupid. You need the gig." And I said, "I'll put my amp in the truck and drive down right now. What do I got to do?"
Mm,
I even talked to some manager of his briefly on the phone. So they actually went through the effort of calling me and saying, "Just look, we got a short list. We know who we want. For whatever reason doesn't work out, we'll call you. Thanks for your interest." Like I said, never really meant to work out, but it was cool being referred to from the only other guy on the list of who they wanted.
mm.
That was kind of a boost for me, but no, I never got an audition or anything, so it was never meant to be. But I got to fantasize for a couple days there and entertain some butterflies, for no reason. But who knows?
Yeah, well, you never
But
know what's going
nothing.
to come up either. in the future, near
Well,
future?
you never know what's going to come up, but you also do know what's not going to come up. I'm 52, and there's no more David Bowie's or Billy Joel gigs out there. So I think we're just going to just practice getting better on Cubase, man, and just create here at home.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that does. I've got to say that surprises me a bit. And look, I appreciate you don't want to share who the bass player was that not put yourself forward. But look, I think Ozzy has a
No,
habit
from
of.
Ozzy, it was Christian from Fear Factory.
Holy shit, God, he would have been. Oh, probably a nice guy, but he would have been completely inappropriate for that setup. I mean,
Dude,
he's.
that was his word. It was his words. He told me, he goes, "I'm new metal." He
Yeah,
goes,
exactly.
he goes, he said, "I would not." He didn't really even want the gig. I mean, I'm sure, if we're gonna hypothetically talk about everything here and fantasize, I mean, if he was pushed into the gig, he would have made the most of it.
Yeah, for sure.
He would have
Yeah.
enjoyed himself. But with finding out he was on a 2-man short list, he called me and said, "You need to bookend Zach. You guys, you're two long blonde hair, bell bottoms, and stuff like that." He said, "That's
Mm,
what needs to happen." And I said, "I agree. What do I got to do?" No, there's no qualms in hiding who it was. That's just
yeah.
Christian's a friend that goes way back to when he was just a pup, and he still had braces on his teeth. He was playing guitar in a Belgian band called Cyclone, and we toured together, Cyclone and Sadus,
Oh yeah.
and we got along great because he told me he was mainly a bass player, and he played upright bass, and he played it real slap punchy kind of. He played it a rockabilly. I never really saw it or anything, but he was excited to tell me all about his rockabilly upright bass playing and stuff.
Mm,
And it was kind of funny too, because he gave us a little nod. He's like, "Oh, I'm probably going to move to the States. I'm going to join a band called, we're going to make a band called Fear Factory." And you hear those words for the first time, and you're like, Fear Factory, what a weird name, and well, it came true for him, and he made a good career for himself. But yeah, he's the one who called me and said, "I don't want to join Ozzy. You should." And I said, "Okay, let's go."
yeah, they've not made. Look, look. I think Gus was. I've spoken to Gus about this too. Yeah, Gus G, of course, the Greek fellow who was Ozzy's guitarist. He's my favourite guitarist. I'm like outside of. I think the Randy thing's fine, but it's been deified after death. If you know what I'm saying, I don't. I question, and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody here or cause any dramas, but I don't know whether his legacy would be the momentous thing it is if he was still alive. Because I think it was common knowledge he wasn't the rock guy. He was going to go back to doing music tuition and playing more Al Di Meola sort of stuff. After, yeah, Randy, that is, yeah. Yeah, so on that note, that's probably why I appreciate Gus's playing and Jake's playing. But so the guitarists I think have been on point, but some of the drummers they've had over the years, and especially some of the bass players, I question it. Like, again, nothing against Blasco, but he's not really a bass player's bass player. I saw in 2008 when the band came to Australia. To be honest, they were pretty bad, and I'm a fan. Okay, but Zach wasn't having a good night that night. He was. I didn't think he really wanted to be there. Ozzy was a full half a beat, maybe. Yeah, yeah, I'm hearing you. Yeah. Ozzy was the entire concert or thereabouts, except for the Sabbath songs, funnily enough, Ozzy was a full half a beat behind the rest of the band. So it was like as if he'd taken a downer before he'd gone on stage, just to sort of calm his nerves or something. And Blasco, I could barely bloody hear him, and the dynamic of the band was just wrong. And I often wondered how they make decisions to bring people into the fold that way. Is it a producer, or is it an engineer, or is it still Sharon orchestrating things behind the scenes, not even behind the scenes, right in front of everybody? Because they,
Well, you would need somebody on the inside to answer that, because we're all just speculating. But
sure, yeah, yeah,
I would throw out a pretty good guess that it's probably his wife. And I think the people that get the gig are more of a friend above all any kind of player. I
yeah,
mean, your reputation as a player, kind of comes with you. They're not going to hire a friend who can't play the instrument clearly, but as long as you can stand there and play, if you're easier to get along with, you put up less of an argument, and you just basically take what they give you. And I'm talking about like contractually and,
mm,
you know, your travel arrangements and all this kind of stuff. If you're just willing to just be happy to be there, that's the kind of guy they want. And that's how a lot of people get the gig over, and to speak on that even further, I think that even holds true to guys, or well, to guys or girls that play with Billy Joel or David Bowie, you know, it's not a matter of who's better than who plays more licks. I mean, you got to
Yeah.
be the complete package. Lee Sklar, just, I mean, you can't go 10 minutes without not hearing him say, I'm just a boring bass player. I'm, you know, first level. I can't do hot licks. You know, I only need one or two strings. He's the kind of guy that professes like, you know, that he is just what you see. He doesn't have a solo album going off. He's just 1, 2, 3 paint by numbers. But the guy
Yep.
probably has the most session gigs out of anyone. I don't know, maybe Tony Levin or somebody, you know, with chops can join him in that realm. But Lee Sklar has the absolute most amount of getting hired out of everybody. So yeah, it's not not always. It's hardly ever what you can play. It's more how you play and who you are and what you can deal with. And that's how you get the gigs. So I don't think there was ever a chance for me to get hired outside of the kind of underground extreme realm, just because I've only ever painted a picture of myself as just playing in crazy ass fucking just insane music, you know, and that's just the way it is, you know, and that's fine, because that little underground niche has turned into a complete genre that I've lived long enough to see evolve into a bona fide genre that now has subgenres of itself. So that's fine. I was just on the kind of early edge of it. But I would, you know, I would have loved to take one of those big kind of, they call them arena gigs or whatever. Like you said, you know, David Bowie or so. I would have loved to do that shit. I would like to see how challenging it would be to play in something completely out of my element, like, who knows, like Shakira or
Yeah, for sure.
something just
Like what Nuno Betancourt
well,
is doing with Rihanna, for example, doing something just left field. Yeah.
something totally unexpected. You know, that would be a real challenge I'd like to live up to, as long as they still need live musicians and you know, live instrumentation is required. I could probably see about living up to that challenge, but I'm not into the electronic stuff or any of that crap.
No, I'm hearing you, and me neither. And look, there is one band that I'm really glad you're not in the band, to be honest with you, because it'd be just I don't know how Rob does it, mate, because I know Rob's a bloody good bloke and just sort of knows when to not say anything, but you know where I'm headed. Metallica. I mean, I can't believe that you I don't look, from what I read, you weren't one of the names that was put forward. Now that's crazy to me, because you know the instrument. I mean, for non-musicians out there, I can't imagine what Jason went through as a person and as a musician, trying to fit in between the percussive jam of the very erratic Lars Ulrich, and he is erratic as a musician. When I saw them here in Brisbane, he was out of time quite a bit, and I'm not being critical about that. I'm just giving feedback based on my observation of
Well
what I
known
heard.
fact. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Well known fact.
but Jason basically, not Jason, James almost plays the bass himself with the way that he downpicks. Okay. So I think any bass player that steps into that, and look, we know Rob's a tremendous musician and a bass player. I don't know how he does it, but my question for you around that is, were you even tempted when they were holding auditions? Surely you heard about it. Were you tempted to put your name forward just to see what happened?
No, not at all. I think you're mainly talking about, I don't know, you talk about Jason, but it seems like you're mainly talking about the second audition. The first one that happened back in 1986.
Yeah, the second audition. Sorry, but go for it. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was going to say is I learned my lesson the first time, because during the first audition in '86, the old singer of Exodus, his name was Paul. He was out of Exodus, and he was living in one of the clubs in San Francisco, taking on this new role as kind of a local promoter. He was throwing shows together, and he really liked Sadus. He booked a lot of shows for Sadus. He's actually probably the kingpin in bringing Sadus and Dark Angel together for many shows, which spawned me and Gene's friendship that,
Well,
up to this very minute is still quite alive. So that's another long-winded tangent, but so he would call us out to San Francisco in the afternoon sometimes, like, hey, why don't you guys come pick up your envelope full of tickets, or why don't you guys drive out here to the city and check out this contract? It was all code word for let's smoke a joint, have some beers or whatever.
Yeah.
But so we would just go, and I never really close friends with Paul or anything, but he liked Sadus as a group. So we went out and hung with him. He probably treated all the bands he booked like that. He was a real friendly guy, real outgoing. And he looked at me and he said, man, you're my guy. I'm going to take you to James. I'm going to take you to the audition. I'm going to get you in that band. He kind of wanted to be this kind of, impromptu, personal agent for me, like right on the spot. And I just got scared all of a sudden. I was 19 years old and I was like, dude, man, they're really, really old, man. They're like 23 and, and they've already like recorded studio albums and been on tour. I've never been on an album and I've never toured and I've never done any of that stuff, man. They're going to want somebody that's on their level. It doesn't have to be their level of fame, but definitely their level of experience, and I said I've never set up in a studio. I've never, been in a van on the road or none of that stuff. It's like, I was immediately scared off by it. I was like, Paul, you can't do that to me, man. And because of my hesitation, it bought me some time to hear stories about bass players that were just completed like total shit. They took the opportunity to just completely ridicule guys, give them time for an audition with knowing damn well they were never going to get the guy in the band. They just wanted to, I think they had I don't know if it was like a rehearsal space that they rented or just a straight up like apartment that they just rented to have their auditions in. And I even heard, now this is subject to, get backed up by people that know the story better, but I heard through the grapevine that a young bass player from a band called Blind Illusion, who had not formed the group Primus yet, named Les, went for this audition, and they said, okay, cool, put your bass and your amp down and go buy us beer. And I think I think the legal age of drinking back then was 21. I think maybe he wasn't old enough, or I don't know, maybe if he was age something else, he had a hard time buying them fucking beer, and he had to get someone else to buy it. And it turned out he almost got in trouble for it. Well, he managed to get it. He brought the beer back. They all popped one, sat around drinking, laughing, and they ran out and they're like, oh, look at that, we're out of beer. We can't start your audition till you go get us more beer. And that's how they were treating these auditions, and all it did to this little inexperienced, skinny 19-year-old was just make me shake my head and say, hell no, I can't buy beer. I can't freaking picture myself in that. And I just had to keep telling Paul Bailoff, no way, man, it's not for me. He's like, yeah, man, come on. You're my guy, man. I'm going to take you there, man. Me and you, I'm going to get you this gig, man. Come on, man. You're my guy. You're my guy. And I was just like, I don't think I'm anybody's guy, man. I'm just, I'm from, I opened the interview with telling you I live kind of in a suburban area. Well, back in the 80s, this was less suburban and more kind of orchards, agricultural, small town. And we didn't fit in with all the Bay Area bands. We didn't fit in because we were just little orchard rednecks, hicks that lived out in the boonies. And there was no way I pictured, I scared myself out of even getting an audition. And as it turned out, I ventured a lucky guess. They got a guy from Flotsam and Jetsam that was their age, that had recorded studio records and been on a tour and had this kind of experience level. They got a guy that was not only going to make news like, hey, we got so-and-so from such and such band, but also a dude that says, okay, I know what to do. So it was a lucky guess, but I was right. And so when the second audition came up, I don't know what fucking year it was, 99 or 2000 or whatever. I already knew, don't knee jerk to that fucking group of people. They made a spectacle out of it. And some of the spectacle was positive. A lot of bass players got exposure. I guess the auditions were incorporated into their stupid movie their movie that they made.
No, it was stupid. Don't worry, you're on point.
Very stupid.
Very sad. Yeah.
But dumb. Some of the bass players, and I know one of them personally, Elena, sorry, Elena, but you are a girl, and you're a very, very good bass player. Awesome fucking bass player. I support you. She killed it. She crushed the audition. She made everyone cheer, and she got good exposure from it. And she probably thought it was a freaking long dart toss to maybe get a chance, but she went for it. And a lot of those guys in that audition were of that mindset, like kind of like, hey, you never know. But then, you see who they choose and you look into it, even for just a couple minutes, you look into it and you find out, oh, the guy they chose is Kirk's best friend. He goes surfing with him.
Mm-hmm.
He's already a buddy. They could have probably just skipped the complete audition spectacle and just called him up and said, dude, you're the guy we want. We're not even going to call number 2 or 3 or nothing. Just get in our band now,
Mm.
So that's why I never messed with it. I have to stop my, my conceitedness. And, when people ask me if I ever thought about it or had a chance, I have to realize that somebody envisioned me on rock star level of Metallica, and that has to be taken as a complete compliment. And
Yep.
once the gratitude is done, like, oh, thank you, wow, what a major compliment. You picture me in one of the biggest bands ever. I mean, what do you got? Even Beatles weren't even together that
Probably
long.
the biggest band of all time. Yeah, Metallica at this
Biggest band of
point.
all time.
Yeah.
I mean, Sabbath, Priest, Maiden, they all went through
U2.
breakups or
Yeah.
down periods. I mean, the only bands really that maybe come close, AC/DC, pretty continuous, pretty no real big setbacks. But it's hard to find that level. Maybe Scorpions, but Metallica, I mean, from the 80s to present day, fucking nailing it. Biggest band ever. So for someone to say, hey, did you ever picture being in that? They pictured me in it, and I got to say thanks. But, I mean, the bottom line, it's not my group of guys. I'm not their kind of chum. I'm not their buddy. Or what?
Yeah.
Fucking, I'm losing Aussie slang, mate. Fuck, sorry. I'm not their kind of their bloke. It's not my music. Anybody can play the riffs. Obviously, you got to play them right and convincingly, and that's where Rob steps up and does a great job. Rob's talent level is clearly much higher than what's required, but I've also learned, coming from extreme and very fretboardy gymnastic level music, that you can't just walk in a band of Testament and say, like, oh, Testament riffs are fucking way easier than Death or Sadus. This should be no problem. No, there's a lot more to nailing the part than just, the amount of notes or the BPM. There's a whole attitude and a whole feel thing in there that gets lost a lot of times with over technicality. And that's what exists in Metallica, and Rob provides that. I don't know, people like to bash Rob for the way he walks around on stage or whatever, but I'm in Rob's corner. He's a great bass player. He does a good job. He could play circles around it, but that's not the point. The point is playing within that circle and keeping the job, and he's doing it. And I don't have that in me to do that night after night for a band like Metallica. Not that they play night after night. The guys barely ever play. And that's another thing that would bother me. They're so fucking famous. They're just full of inactivity. That would drive me crazy. From a guy who's doing, a long list of unknown session work after unknown. I mean, I do a lot of bands' first albums and a lot of solo albums of guys from other bands. And so my resume is full of a lot of stuff. People going, what? Who's that? Who's that? And that doesn't fit Metallica criterion either. So I just got to be me, man. But, we could all dream.
Oh, look, you do a great job. And look, my feelings about Rob being in the band are, I mean, he's like a regular person. You know what I'm saying? He's not a rock star. He's like us. You know what I mean? He's a bloke who's got kids who just tries to sort of provide for his family. I really get that vibe from him, and I've always got that vibe from him. And, the other thing too is, he does things like plays Celtic Frost. You know how him and Kirk do that thing where they cover a song for a couple of minutes in a different country. So in Australia, of course, they do AC/DC. In Switzerland, they did Celtic Frost. So I would venture to suggest the majority of Metallica fans these days have never heard of Celtic Frost, which would be unbelievable for you and I, of course, because they're such a formidable band. But a lot of the Metallica fans, they're the mainstream sort of music fans, really, who just get into it because it's heavy metal. It's their choice of metal band. But I don't know how he does it, mate. And I'm really glad you didn't happen to you, mate, because I think that's been the issue with Jason. Just a few of the people that I've spoken to that have been around Jason is that, far be it for me to say, but my impression is he's still recovering. he's still sort of making decisions about what he wants to do with himself post Metallica.
Yeah, I mean, now that we're so many years down the line, there's been a lot of interviews from him, Bob Rock, a lot of sources, and the truth's out. They treated him like shit,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't have fared half as well as good old Jason. No way. So
Hmm.
and really at the end of the day, I'm just not even really a Metallica fan. Um, I
Me
I
neither.
got into Ride the Lightning when it came out, so I know I was
Yeah.
still in high school, so I could say pre 85, I guess 80. I don't even know, 83, 84. I guess I got into a phase where I really, really liked Ride the Lightning,
Hmm.
which got me to listen to their first album. So I kind of got into the band and album two, which led me to look at their previous album, which was fucking great as a bass player. You're like, oh yeah, Cliff's the man.
Mm-hmm.
And they were from around here, so we got to see them play in clubs with just 125 people, 150 people sometimes, and that you know when you're there in that moment, it's not a super big deal. But then when you look back at their fame and how you were part of the early days, like we brought up Primus briefly. I I don't know if I was at Primus' very very first gig, but I was at one of the first, and I think there was maybe 20 to 30 people watching them, and and I was one of them, and that's incredible when you see the level of the band now and think you're like, wow, I got to see them when they were playing a freaking bar for nobody, man. That's.
Yeah.
So I can't say I saw Metallica play for nobody, but when they're playing a small club for just a couple hundred people, it felt like nobody compared to what they are now.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
So there was definite appreciation, man, and I'll always have 100% appreciation for them. But I'm not a fan. Besides Ride the Lightning, I've never really cranked up any of their albums and never had an urge to listen to Metallica. Um, I already learned that doesn't take away my metal street cred at all, so it's okay to admit it. So I'm okay with it, but no. But fortunately, I got to meet Rob, and he is, like you said, completely down to earth. In fact, it blew me away that he was such a big fan of my own. Like he was just going off about how he likes Death and Sadus, and he was pointing out different parts and specific songs. Oh, that fretless is amazing. Like, he was not bullshitting me. He was speaking from a guy with knowledge, and that
Yeah,
was
for
super
sure.
humbling. Super humbling. I'm glad I had a guy from Testament there watching it, because if I came back and said, "Hey, Metallica's bass player is, the the the
He's a
number
fan.
one
He
Stevie
gets
D
it.
fan," they would have been like, "Yeah, you're full of fucking shit, motherfucker. You're a liar." But I had a witness. Rob is a true fan, which just makes me admire him even more. That
Yeah.
he is down to earth. He's into the scene. He's into the music. He's inspired. He's a very excitable guy, man. He was like, after we did our cool selfie together and shook hands and walked away, I could hear him in the distance. Death! He's got his horns up in the air. Death! Fuck yeah, Death! He's cheering me on, and I was just like, I couldn't. My feet wouldn't touch the ground for 2 hours, man. I
That's
was
so
like
nice. Yeah.
grabbing branches off the tree to try to get my feet on the ground. I was blown away. But I like to bring up that story to illustrate what a fucking cool guy he is, man. He's a music fan. He's into underground, and he it's cool that he represents, the small guy, but man, he's being on team bass
For
player.
sure.
Fucking, we love Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. And look, you mentioned Les a few times there too, and I only spoke to Dave White, the singer from he's known Heathen, or he's Heathen, but
Yeah,
he
I know
was
Dave.
Blind Illusion. Yeah, he was Blind Illusion singer. So I actually asked him. I said, "Man, the Les thing, when you're in the band, because Blind Illusion I always think of them as a thrash band. I know there's some other things in there, but they've got that thrash vibe.
Completely. No, they're a
Yeah,
thrash band. Biederman is a thrash guy.
yeah,
He's
there you
like
go.
the Chuck Schuldiner for his little sector, where he hired guys that weren't necessarily shoot in to the stereotype. Getting a guitar player from Possessed, Larry, and then getting a really wacky bass player like Les, and then Mike Miner on drums. That was a really eclectic lineup, but it made that
Mm.
Blind Illusion album just fucking awesome, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, killer album. And I think I said to him, I said, when did you notice Les was, really unique? Because he is. I mean, he's probably one of he and Billy Gould were the first two. Yourself, Bob, But I remember hearing Les and just going, what the hell is he doing? Because it sounded I'm not going to say wrong. It just sounded like as though, well, who else still sounds like him? He's by himself, you know. But he was talking about how he took some time out of Blind Illusion and woodshedded some stuff. So he obviously took Larry with him, and I've spoken to Larry about this, and I've spoken to Jeff Becerra about this as well. Larry to me is one of the guys who invented death metal because they were his riffs, I think, in the Possessed albums. It wasn't Jeff actually writing the music; he was more of the lyrics and the guttural vocal, bringing that in. But the actual riffs, I think, they weren't Mike Torraro's. I think they were Larry's, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got these guys.
I think both wrote, but Larry definitely gets at least 50% credit, if not more. Sure.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so when I spoke to Larry about it, sorry, long way to make the point. Larry seemed totally oblivious to the impact and the effect that he had on people as a heavy metal guitarist. It seems like, I wouldn't say that he's distanced himself from it, but it feels a lot like that. If I didn't know better,
he has. He definitely has. And back when he was transitioning from Possessed through Blind Illusion into Primus, he was almost embarrassed of, he kind of shied because I was a super fan, and I would sit next to Larry and say, "Let me buy you a beer," and he's all, "I'm not old enough to drink, man." I'm like, "Oh my God, he's already on his third killer band, and he's still not old enough to drink at a bar." Yeah. So I was super fan around him. Fortunately, I got to Blind Illusion and Sadus got to play with Blind Illusion for a few shows, so we got to kind of get to know the guys. We got to mingle at least on show day and got to know the guys. And yeah, Larry was cool. He was ready to just look forward all the time. He was appreciative of compliments from Possessed, but he was over it. He was in the moment of Blind Illusion, and even so in the moment he was already looking ahead to doing something else. So he wasn't completely unaware of his legacy completely. I mean, he's just
it's weird. Yeah, he's so influential, yet he just doesn't realize it. And I'll tell you what happened when I was speaking to Jeff Becerra about it. We had a conversation very similar to the one you and I are having now, a pretty broad conversation. And probably about an hour or two later afterwards, I mentioned Larry. He actually sent me a message saying it was just, "I miss Lair ... Oh, is Larry ... So, I mean, there's clearly not a lot of contact there between Jeff and the current Possessed lineup and what they're doing there and what Larry's doing. I think I might have been the first person to tell Larry, actually, that Possessed were back and they had a new album in market. And it sounds pretty good. It doesn't sound like the old Possessed, but for all things considered...
It sounds almost like the old Possessed. It sounds like a really, really cool progression. And it doesn't sound like a million years between it either. It sounds like a few years, and it sounds a little different, but it's very Possessed-ish, and it's really fucking cool.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, but
it was sorry, but it sounded like you were headed there anyway. So.
I'm of the same view, and I wanted to make that point to Jeff because I think it is important that he is out there and still doing it. As the original gangster, if you like, with that vocal style and really having a song called death metal. I mean, there's always that. I never comment because there's no point. But the Facebook arguments about whether it's death, even early Sepultura or Possessed were the first death metal bands, and I sort of think, I mean, this sort of stuff just keeps things interesting until it starts getting nasty, and then I just tune out and think, all right, ladies, fight it out amongst yourselves.
Well, see, I was around in those days. I was driving my car with Chuck sitting next to me, when he made the Mutilation demo in '86, and we were both huge Possessed fans. We would go to the Possessed concerts together. He loved Possessed. He looked up to them. He would never claim to be first or second with Possessed, but he also wouldn't claim to be exactly ahead or behind them in any particular line either, because we always liked Jeff's vocals because they were like an even more drunk Lemmy. They were never super low,
so
low. Yeah. Jeff never sang low. Chuck sang low. Chuck's early. Well, not too early. You go back early enough. Chuck's just screaming like a kid. But like when Death became what it was, the early demo before Scream Bloody Gore, Chuck was already singing low. Jeff didn't do that. Riff wise, not a huge difference. So if we're just going to compare riffs between Death and Possessed, maybe Possessed has an edge there because Chuck was a little young. Well, actually, age-wise, Possessed might have been younger than us, but they started before.
Yeah.
So the age of the band, they were ahead of the game. And so Chuck might admit, riff-wise, maybe Possessed had an edge on that. I think he was a big fan. I don't think he looked to them to draw all his inspiration. But vocally, not even compared. He loved Jeff's voice, and I think he aspired to make his voice higher like Jeff's and not lower like what is known as death metal vocals.
Mm-hmm.
And I also say to the Possessed having a song called Death Metal, actually the song Death Metal is like one of their least death metal-y sounding songs.
Yeah.
They have other way more morbidly heavy songs. They should get the credit by all means for whatever they want. They're definitely first in a lot of categories, as well as Chuck. But being around Chuck and listening to him tell me how he kind of, aimed his vocals, he considered himself pretty different than Possessed. He would never settle the argument by saying first or second, because he would say they were both first at something. I think he heard guys like Chris Barnes and other, I don't know. Chuck should get a lot of credit for starting that vocal style, because even dudes that he would say, oh no, my voice is more like this guy, even in those days, they weren't super similar. There was only slight, like Max from Sepultura, he tried to make his voice lower, but he didn't have the power that Chuck had. And Max also did higher screams that Chuck always wanted to do, said he couldn't do. So back then, splitting hairs and everything, I don't know. Chuck was first in a lot of things, but I know his view on the Death Possessed thing, and Chuck would back away from that table because he loved Possessed, and he wouldn't want to compete with that because we were fans. He was a big fan of Possessed, but as far as the world's concerned, who's first to death metal, I don't know. Chuck was, everyone's looking over on this side where Becerra is singing that style. Chuck was completely focused over here saying, like, what are you talking about? I don't sing like Jeff at all. Our voices aren't even close. So he's looking over here. So I think Jeff has gotten a little drawn into that unnecessarily. I think people want to make a big deal out of it, and Jeff has to kind of stand up and say, look, I love Chuck. I love Death. I don't want to compete, but gosh damn it, at the end of the day, we were
yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
They should get major credit because they were young kids. They were still in high school doing that shit, and the combat contract didn't come to Chuck until 18 years old, 19 years old. Possessed had already done 3 albums by the time Chuck was ready to do his first, I think. Yeah, I think Eyes of Horror. I think we were listening to Eyes of Horror about the time Scream Bloody Gore came out. So, Chuck would back away from the table and say, no argument. Possessed is the fucking OG. Don't want a part of it. Love the band. But yeah, Jeff is drawn into it. But I think Jeff had a long road to kind of come out of the cloud. I think he was deep into Substance for a while. It took him out of the game.
For sure.
And so, I think he's kind of living a second wind or a resurgence, and I think that keeps him excited with the music, and he definitely, he keeps his ear to the ground. He remembers the old bands, and he's pretty good cataloging names now that his wits are about him, and he acknowledges all the old days and stuff. Jeff's an old trooper, man. And I'm glad the Possessed album turned out the way it did, because if it flopped, people would just write him off. But fucking killer album, gives him a little, I know he's close to my age, so when you get up to this level and you put out something good, you feel pretty good about yourself.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's a little different self-congratulating going on than when you're young. It's a different ego that appeals to when you get older.
Look, you make a good point. Yeah, when I had a chat to Jeff about it, I wasn't surprised that he sort of brought it up or anything like that. But he certainly is emphatic that that they were the first, and I was thinking, oh, look, I think you're one of the first extreme metal bands in the same way that Venom are one of the first blackened metal bands and Bathory and the like. But death metal didn't start sounding the way it does now until Chuck came along, in my opinion. So I understand one came before the other, but there are elements of just about any modern day death metal band that you can trace back to Leprosy and Scream Bloody Gore, even some of the Mantis stuff. You know what I'm saying? You can actually go back, and for me even. And I've spoken to, of all people, Trey's mum from Morbid Angel about this because, of course, getting an interview with Trey is bloody impossible in 2020 and beyond. So I reached out to his mum, and his mother's just lovely. I've got to tell you, and because Trey's playing fascinates me in a similar manner as yours does, because I also play guitar, but I'm always a bass player first, but I've picked up the guitar as you tend to do, and I've listened to Trey, and I've spoken again to Bill Hudson about this, who plays in I Am Morbid with David Vincent, as you know. And I said, I remember talking to his mum. I said, how did he win? How? Like, how did he start playing like that? She goes, basically, it was in him. She shared with me, and it's now public knowledge that he has Asperger's, which allows him to hyper focus, and that makes complete sense because Chuck was one thing. But to be quite honest, Trey is just something else. He's out there in planet Neptune, and and talking to Bill about it, who has to play his guitar lines. I said, because Bill's a hell of a guitarist, right? Brilliant guitarist, but more of a traditional heavy metal and classic metal style guitarist. Saying, when you were first playing this stuff, did it just sound like noise? And he goes, absolutely. I thought it was just some guy riffing, but when I actually sat down, this stuff had tonal qualities that suggested to me that he knew exactly what he was doing. So it's really interesting. My point there being, it's really interesting talking to the people like yourself who are part of the scene, and then there's the fans' perspective, then there's an industry perspective. But it's always better to get it straight from the horse's mouth with someone like yourself. And of course, it's never black and white, is it? About who did what and who started what. It's all just part of one big. It reminds me a bit. Just allow me to make this point, okay? Because I think it's an important one. Heavy metal is effectively a transatlantic thing.
Hello. Oh.
Hey, can you hear me? I just cut out. Then it just said on hold. All good.
Yeah, I got a phone call. I guess when the phone rings, it puts Skype on hold. So I just declined the call. Plus, my battery's on 4%. So
shit. Well.
I don't want to seem like I just jump out on you, but I'm gonna.
No, that's look. As you can tell, I could keep talking, mate, but my point there was going to be that, all you great musicians that have contributed so much to us, for me as a fan, we don't know each other, but I can't tell you, Steve, how much I appreciate the work that you've done, because it's a bit like back in the day when all these pyramids sprung up at around about the same time all over the world. There's some collective consciousness, and that's my point, that connects us all as extreme and heavy metal music fans and fans of your bass playing and stuff. And my final point was going to be, and I need to make it now, is that, mate, I want you to understand something. Your playing and your approach to music is so important, because without you, our lives wouldn't be as enhanced as what it is at the moment. I mean, I listen to your playing, man, and I get a boost of energy, to give you an idea. I just listen to you and I think, man, life is actually worth living. And I think there are a lot of people out there like that, man, who actually feel that same way and feel that strong,
That's heavy, man. I don't know how to tell you how much I appreciate the compliment. It's amazing, and it's not coming from a place of not understanding it. I fully understand it because I have my guys. I have my guys that I would like to say that to eventually one day if they quit dropping dead. But I know the musicians that inspired me to not only pick up and play and emulate them and want to be like them, but like you said, on a higher level, just to make you feel great, to give you a boost of energy just towards anything in life. I got my guys. And for you to say that, I mean, thank you so much, man. That's amazing.
Pleasure, mate.
Very, very awesome for you to say that. I appreciate it.
No, I just feel privileged to be able to give you that feedback, to be honest with you. I mean, there's, you got fans all over the world. You know that, man. People love you. They love your playing. It's, as I say, it's so important. But look, my final point would be, I wasn't going to release this as a video, but if you're comfortable, man, I might even put it up on YouTube. Are you comfortable with that as well as the podcast edition, or do you just want me to do the podcast side of things?
As you see, man, it's your show. I'm talking to you like we would talk in a bar or in public, man. Whatever you want to show the world, it's up to you. Whatever promotes your show the best, I'm all for you.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, yeah, and oh, I know you've only got 2%, mate, but I'll plant the seed now. I'd love to write your book for you, your autobiography, because I'm a writer, I'm a journalist and a writer. So if ever you need, if unless you've been hit up already, by all means, do what you need to do. But if you ever want to reach out to someone who's invested and who actually wants to see that story come to life, man, I've got my hand up for you.
Well, I might have to take you up on that because I don't think Joel McIver would stoop down to my level. I'm just kidding. Joel's a cool guy. We like to actually, that's, that people talk about degrees of separation, now that me and you have connected, and then there's Ralph and Joel and certain people, I think we can make a little tighter circle than we really think.
True. That's so true.
Because Ralph was pestering Joel just probably the same way he did you. Ralph seemed to permeate everywhere. and Joel was the kind of guy to go with it, like yourself. So I
Awesome.
think there's something to be said about that if me and Ralph were buds and we could bother somebody like Joel, maybe you're just the guy we need.
All right, well, keep me in mind, mate. As I say, look, I'm always open to it. I've got the time now to be able to do these sorts of things, and I've got the training these days, probably more to the point. So I don't plan on letting you down, put it that way, if you ever want your story told. But, mate, I really appreciate this conversation, man, and all the very best with everything.
Yeah, likewise. Really nice talking to you, Andy, and good luck with everything. And if you need, we don't have to cut the line here. You ever need anything, reach out. I'm here for you. You could go directly to me, Tarja.
Thanks, yep.
Tarja helps make the connections on kind of a promotional level, but she's just helping me out because of the weight of the schedule. But I mean, on a personal level, I'm wide open. I'm your guy. So if you need anything, don't hesitate.
I appreciate it, man. That's awesome. Very kind of you too, man. All right. So, well, look, all the best, and hopefully we definitely catch up sometime in the near future.
Yeah, for sure. And if we do, hopefully, your finals are out of the way and you catch up on your sleep. And
I'm doing that this week.
Yeah, that's what I figured. When you said you had final week at university, I told Tarja, I said, well, make it for the next week then.
Oh, thanks for doing that, by the way. I appreciated that, by the way. Yeah. But, all done now, mate. All done. But 2 years is done. It's a compact degree, but, mate, I'm glad I've done it because I've got the training now, so I'm confident now.
Yeah. Well, at this point in time, up here in the Northern Hemisphere, I'd say, well, now enjoy your summer. School's over, but I know you guys are opposite side, and you're not in summer, and we are. It's actually, oh, look at that, cooled down to 38 since we've been talking.
It's 38. Well, it's 26 degrees here at the moment, mate. I'm in Queensland. You've been to Australia before, so yeah. I'm in Queensland, mate. We never get cold here. The coldest we get is like 15, 16 degrees Celsius, which is, 80 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever it is, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, so not cold.
Yeah, 15. I think it's around like 50 or so. Anyway, who cares?
Is it? Oh, yeah.
I'm training my brain to pick up certain, I would say metric, but I'll just say the rest of the world increments, because stupid British colonized here, left us with their system, then went back to the UK and converted to metric with the rest of the world. Left us here with some fucking bizarre incremental system. So I take it upon myself to try to join the rest of the world. I'm not an expert, but yeah, I can relate, man. So anyway, we could go on and on. Nice talk, Andy, and good luck in the future. Before my battery dies, say, see you, bud.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man. All right.
Cool.
Catch ya.
Take care.
Bye.
Ciao.
You have been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and didn't I tell you that was going to be a special episode? Wow. Steve Giorgio, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Hit me up on socials if you want to have a chat about anything. I'm fairly easily found. Just search Scars and Guitars on Facebook and on Instagram. Appreciate that you've listened. Cheers.